that's kind of what I used as my own personal rally call to kind of like see this whole thing through. Is that this is what we were called to do, to be stewards of this business that was entrusted into our care.
Welcome to the Leadership Lens, a resource of the Indian Valley Chamber of Commerce and your gateway to regional business leaders' minds and stories. Join us for engaging interviews fostering connections within our dynamic business community.
Welcome back to the Leadership Lens podcast provided by the Indian Valley Chamber of Commerce. I'm Ken Carfagno. I'm excited to welcome to the podcast Doug Clemens, formerly of the Clemens Food Group. Doug, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
You're welcome. That was the first time I think officially I've heard formally.
Is that okay to say? I mean, formally.
Okay. No, it's been a year and a half now, so I need to get used to that for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how Prince felt when he was called the artist formerly known as Prince. So you're Doug Clemens, the CEO, the formerly known CEO of Clemens.
Formerly known, that's right. You got
formerly known. So we get started off with some jokes. That's about right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Doug. You have been somebody I've been looking forward to meet. Steven has talked about you a lot. Steven Hunsberger is a friend, a mentor. And you're sitting in his desk right now at the chamber office.
Sitting in his seat as we speak.
You must feel a tremendous just pull and just a power just sitting in that chair right there.
I'm feeling it. I'm definitely feeling it. I banished him to the next room over, so I'm grateful that he sacrificed a seat for me for a few.
I mean, it's a powerful seat to run the chamber. I know Clemens is a pretty powerful seat. But I tell you, that chamber seat, how do you compare the two?
You cannot compare
it. Oh, I have a lot of questions. I really do. And the way that my MO is I'll ask a question and we might just skim over one and that was great. And otherwise I may just grab my big shovel. We may just keep digging deep and it may get into so many different areas that just paints a complete picture of who Doug the man is. I know that you've been a very successful business leader, and I have a bunch of questions on that. But I'm just gonna ask kind of some career type questions first, just like what you did in your former career and what that was like, and then we'll dive into some really fun and relevant leadership topics. How's that sound?
That sounds like a good plan.
All right,
ready to start the journey. I'm not even sure where you want to begin with where did the career start? Because I was actually born and raised until I was 2 years old. So I wasn't born there, I wasn't raised there, but we lived at what we called the plant until I was 2. That makes it much more clear. So there was actually a house on the property where the current Clemens Food Group, Hatfield Quality Meats, sits. And we were one of 3 families that actually resided in that farmhouse. So my career didn't start when I was 2, but I think it probably started when I was about 8 or 9. So that included jobs like picking up trash, like cleaning out the hog pens, like cleaning out trailers, like doing simple maintenance things. So as kids, and I've got 4 other siblings, and as kids, whenever my dad would have a task at the plant, guess who was called upon to do it? The 5 kids. So whether it be after school or whether it be on weekends, whatever needed to be done, and he sounded the bell and it was time for us to go to the plant to do whatever it took. That's kind of where the career began. So I actually worked there, long before, this is before child labor laws, I think, were in place. So there was a lot of kids working there then, but and as time went on and I got older, I could perform more production type tasks, which I did through junior high school, through high school, and through college summers. So that's kind of where the experience began. But I can tell you, go ahead.
What birth order are you of the 5 or 4? You said 4.
Of 5.
Of 5. Which one are you, and how many boys?
I am there's 2 boys and 2 girls. and I am the unfortunate middle child.
You were the middle child,
I am the only middle child, but oldest son. So
oldest son.
two older sisters and two younger brothers.
Okay. I'm also the oldest of, well, I'm the oldest of six with most, 3 brothers, 3 sisters. Or
Okay.
two
So you
brothers,
got,
two
you
and
got a
three.
lot of family too.
I do, but different. I was an only child until I was almost 13. And
Okay.
my parents were remarried, and then they both had second families. So
Right.
it's been
Right.
interesting. Yeah, I actually read that bit. I was looking up some articles that you've been interviewed on, and I saw that you were born into the company. So that makes sense. That helps to tie a couple loose ends I had. I'm
Yeah.
sure. Go ahead.
We lived there until I was 2, but then when it was time to move out of that farmhouse, actually, the farmhouse got knocked down because the plant needed to grow for production capabilities. So mom, dad, and I think it was 3 kids at that time. We moved a whole mile away from the plant. So we were still very, very close.
Right.
So it was a lot of jobs through, as I said, junior high school through high school. And I think this is a pretty key thing to mention is that when it was time for me to go to college, I was not going to go work at the plant. I had pretty much decided that wasn't going to be in my future, kind of been there, done that. It wasn't anything that really interested me. So I wanted to go and I wanted to be a veterinarian. I was always around animals. We always had animals at our place.
Really?
Had horses and we had chickens and we had sheep. This is all on a 2-acre lot in Timmins Township, not very far from Hatfield. So very, very interested as a kid, and large animal veterinary medicine is what I wanted to do. So that's what I pursued. So really there were 2 options for me to go to college because I wanted to be somewhat close, but yet far enough away from home. So it was either going to be Penn State or it was going to be West Virginia University. And my dad was really, really harping on me. You got to go to Penn State. You got to go to Penn State. Know everybody who's going to be your teacher, because a lot of these meat science people and animal science people, I did a lot of work with them at the plant as a young kid, helping them do like carcass cutting things and, looking for certain diseases in animals. So I knew all these people, and that's what I did not want to do. So much to my father's dismay, I did not choose Penn State. I chose WVU. So that's where I went.
I was a Penn State grad for mechanical engineering. So that's I was about to relate to you and say, yes, go Lions, but you went Mountaineers on me.
A lot of others in our family went to Penn State, and I was a renegade that went to West Virginia.
That's okay.
So as I said, I mean, going into the business was the farthest thing from my mind. That was not going to be my career path.
I've got all these questions written down. You just touched on one that I'm going to ask. You mentioned that you did not go to work directly for the company.
No.
But I saw in one of your interviews in the year 2000, you had a major restructuring in the company. And one of the rules you put in place was the 3-year rule. Were you doing the 3-year rule, or this was not what you were doing?
No, that was kind of like the beginning of the 3-year rule back in the 1970s. There was no such thing as a 3-year rule. In the 60s, 70s, and really throughout pretty much the history of the company, the rule pretty much was as soon as you put this education stuff behind you, you need to come to work as quick as possible. So it was clearly an expectation that you were to come work for the business.
Wow.
So as I said earlier, I was kind of a renegade against that. And most of my other cousins went directly into the business, either out of high school or directly out of college. So I did begin my journey of pre-veterinary medicine for 2 years.
Yeah.
And after 2 years, I had to meet with my advisor and to talk about where I was going to go to vet school. And the choice was going to be Ohio State or Colorado State, and there was one other school. So I sat down with my advisor and he said, right now the criteria for entrance into vet school is pretty simple. He said it's 3 things, and you need to have one of these 3 things kind of on your resume. You need to be a 4.0 student, which I was not. You had to be a female, which obviously I was not, or you had to be a minority, which I was not.
Ah,
He said, right now, he said, you need to think about changing your major. He said, because the dream of getting into vet school is not going to be in your plan.
how old were
So-
you when you were told this?
So I was
20?
19, almost 20. So that was pretty devastating news, but through his guidance, I quickly switched over to be an animal science major, still with the desire to do something with large animals in some way, shape, or form. But I didn't know what the job was going to be, but that sounded logical to me. So I changed my major to animal science. So that's where I focused my studies and energy on, was completing a degree in animal science until my final semester of my senior year. Do you know this story or don't you know this story?
I don't know this story.
You don't know the story?
No,
I thought a lot of people knew this story.
no, I'm still relatively new to the area. We've only been in Souderton, Harleysville area since 2019, and I'm still learning a lot of stuff.
Well, maybe not many people know this story, so I'll share it with you. So I'm in my 4th and final semester, anticipating graduating with a degree in animal science, not sure what my job was going to be. And 4th semester, final year, I think I had bowling, movie appreciation. It was like 14 credits that I had to complete.
Bowling
And-
was a class.
I wasn't even going to class, but a really interesting thing happened is that I started to lose weight and have double over stomach and back pain and wondering, I didn't know what was going on. And I came home, I think it was Easter break. And when my parents saw me, they took me immediately to the emergency room because I'd looked that bad. I guess I didn't think I'd looked that bad. Real long story short, I had surgery that summer. I dropped out of school. I
Wow.
was diagnosed with something called Crohn's disease,
Oh yeah.
which then in the mid-70s, nobody had heard of it. So in the mid-1970s, Crohn's disease was kind of like this really unusual, rare disease that primarily affected young Jewish males in their early 20s. I bet you never heard that before, but that's what I was told way back when. I'll never forget it.
I didn't know that, but I know
So,
that's a
Jewish
pretty
blood.
devastating.
Got Jewish blood from way back when, but nothing that's real close to me right now. So anyway, drop something.
As far as Jewish blood, you say?
Yeah, I got Jewish blood in me way back, to Abraham, I guess, but it's been a long time.
I'm half Jewish.
You're half Jewish, okay?
Yeah, on my mom's side.
I would consider myself half Mennonite, so I don't know how close that is to Jewish, but it was close enough, I guess. So anyway, real long story short,
Yeah.
I had major surgery down at Lankenau Hospital that summer. So I dropped out of school. I think I weighed 115 pounds. I recuperated, actually went to work on the production floor, specifically the harvest and the cut floor at the plant. I think that was in maybe July. And just trying to recover and rebound. So I re-enrolled because I wanted to finish the last semester. So I went back in at the end of August, the beginning of September. Wow, that was a pretty trying time in my life. My friends were gone. My girlfriend was gone. Everybody was gone, and I felt really alone. And to make matters even worse, my dad was calling me every morning at 4:30 in the morning saying, I really need you at work. You need to come home. I really need you. We're growing kind of leaps and bounds with your background in animal science. We're looking to hire an outside person, but I really wanted to be you to be a livestock buyer for the company. And this went on for I think maybe a month straight, where he was kind of begging me, come home, come home, come home.
Were you in bed a lot at this time too?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, a lot of the time, and a lot of hospital visits back and forth. Yeah, so it was a pretty devastating time for me physically and mentally during that time. And I think I was like 20, I guess I was 21 years old, I think, something like that.
Wow.
Long story short is I finally caved in. I caved in and said, okay, I'm coming home.
So he's persistent. You learned persistence from your father then.
Yeah, for sure. So I came home and I lived at home and I accepted the job as an assistant livestock buyer, working for my second cousin, who was my boss for the next, I stayed in that department for like 15 years.
What was your dad's position at the time?
So my dad and his brother John were pretty much the dual leaders of the company. So my uncle John was president. That was his title. And my dad was vice president. But pretty much John ran the sales side and my dad ran the operations side.
Okay.
But officially John was president, my dad was vice president, and then eventually my dad became president when John retired at 65. So I did the livestock thing for 15 years. And then after that, one day somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, we need a senior leader to run the fresh operations side of the business. So I accepted that role. So I moved into fresh operations. And I think I did that for like 5 years. And then.
So you're about 40 at this point.
No, I'm not quite. No, I'm not 40 yet. I'm probably, let's see, I was 21, 31, 30. Yeah, I'm getting close to 40. I'm getting close to 40. And then the president at that time was my second cousin, the brother of my other second cousin who I used to work for. So Phil Clemens was in charge at that time. And he moved me into business development, which I did for a year or two. And then one day he tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, he said, starting next week, I'm going to make you the VP of strategic planning. And I said, what's that? He said, I don't know, but we need a plan. So I sunk my teeth into getting certified in strategic planning, believe it. So I think then I probably was 40 years old. I put a strategic plan in place at that time when I became certified in strategic planning. But I'll tell you what, it was really interesting because the company was growing at a pretty rapid rate. And there were just so many things that we collectively did not have in place.
Yeah.
I mean, functional budgeting by departments. I mean, as fundamental and basic as that. As an annual capital plan with a return expectation, something as simple as that, then the list would go on and on. So at that time, we as a family went through a lot of serious dialogue for actually more than a year, where there was actually representatives from second, third, and fourth generation of ownership that actually participated in coming up with a more long-range plan, which was probably one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do in my life, was to participate in that. Because as we went through the process, it became pretty obvious to me that when all this was going to be over, that there was probably going to be one person left standing that would probably have to run the business, and that person was going to be me, which I didn't really want to do.
And you knew that was going to happen.
I just kept feeling like
you felt
geez,
it. There's a gut.
I felt it. And this is when we made a really, really dramatic decision to transition from being a family business to a business family.
This is one of my questions. I was going to ask you that exact thing. Could you explain the difference? And
well, there's a lot of papers out there that you can read. Actually, Kellogg did a case study on this whole transition that we went through.
Okay.
So I worked with a guy named John Ward. You heard of Kellogg before? In Northwestern University?
Of course.
Yeah, so I worked one-on-one with John Ward to kind of come up with his plan. So he helped facilitate a lot of this for us. But in its most simplest sense, the way I would describe it to people is that transitioning from a family business to a business family is simply this. The family is extremely important, and the business is extremely important, but the two shall not cross.
Mm.
So we focus on the family with family stuff and focus on the business as business stuff. So as I mentioned earlier, when I was telling you about, the family coming into the business, it was an expectation. You just come into the business.
Yeah.
And if you work hard and you show up every day and you're a really good guy or gal, you're probably going to get promoted to be a supervisor. Didn't matter whether you were trained or not. I mean, that's just kind of the way family businesses ran.
Yep.
So there was no separation. There was no separation at all. So it was a very, very hard and trying time. And people have asked me this over and over again. If you had to go through this whole thing all over again, would you do it? My answer has been consistent and will be consistent today too. I don't know. It was that hard. I mean, it was just simple.
How do you live that out? It's Thanksgiving. What does that look like at Thanksgiving after you did this new reorganization?
This many years later, 24 years later, there's still tension.
I bet.
There's still hurt. There is still animosity. There is still a lot of things that are hanging out there in so many ways, but it comes back to the fundamental thing I just told you a minute ago.
Yeah.
Business is really important. The family is really important. We just need to focus on each one separately. So it's been a lot of work. It's been a lot of work.
Maybe the case study, they came across this, but do you see a lot of small family businesses when they're trying to go from small family business to large family business, they bump into this same issue?
I've interacted with a lot of family business, and to answer your question, I would say 100% of the time. So this separation that I spoke earlier to is almost impossible for the vast majority of family businesses to do. But I can tell you that, the family has continued to grow. So the family keeps getting larger, obviously getting more diverse as time has gone on. And certainly the business has gotten quite a bit larger and successful too. So
Right.
It worked. But it took a lot of people had to take on a lot of heartache to make that happen. So it was not easy.
No. Yeah. The 3-year.
I was just going to say that through a lot of the discussion, one of the questions that kept coming up over and over again, and this is really kind of what I would stand on, is that God has called us to be stewards of this business. So to be stewards of this business, what are we being called to do? And that's being called to be a good steward. So that's kind of what I used as my own personal rally call to kind of like see this whole thing through, is that this is what we were called to do, to be stewards of this business that was entrusted into our care. Period.
That's perfect. Now I'm going to come back to the reorganization, but now I want to go backward in time because you brought up one of my bigger questions. So your great grandfather starts the company, right? 125 years ago. And from what I read, he's the one that incorporated the 3 core values of ethics, integrity, and stewardship.
Correct.
So I just starting from that baseline, like how was that taught and transferred, not through the company, but through the family as a young Doug? How did that why was that so vital, and how did that get trained into you? I'm curious.
So those words, ethics, integrity, and stewardship, were never used when we were kids growing up.
Okay.
It's what we're around kind of all the time, was to do what we say we're going to do, and to do the right thing, and to build a foundation for the future. We actually did not make those official core values until we went through the transition in 2000.
Okay.
But as kids growing up, we knew the expectation was for us to do the right thing. So those things were just kind of ingrained in us. But those core values, without question, we credit those to John C. Clemens, who founded the company. And I said during my career, and I'll even say for those generations that are coming behind me, is that the company is going to continue to change. The company is going to continue to grow. And I'm a huge embracer of change, and maybe we'll probably get to that topic a little bit later on. But one thing that won't change will be the core values and the mission. They will remain constant.
the stewardship piece, I constantly go back to Matthew 25 and dig into stewardship. When we were setting our core values for our company C3, it's been a few years now, but we were at a point where we got stuck and things weren't growing. Now, obviously, a much smaller scale than what you guys are doing, but the question came up, why are we stuck? And I remember my wife came in and she started praying with me, and she just said something in her prayer like, Lord, we're sorry we kind of put ourselves ahead of you, and it dawned on me that there's time to change my pronouns. I've been saying my business, it's what, and we changed our pronouns in 2020, late 2021, to his business.
Yeah.
Or the business.
Our business.
The business. And we went by Matthew 25 and said, we're going to be a 10 talent stewardship company where we want to continually be used. We want to continually get better. So we're trusted more to be given. I don't want to just be given one talent. I want to be given all 5.
Sure.
What do I need to do? And we're going to cover some of the topic of leadership and stuff to get into that. But that's a very important one. It sounds like of the core values as you named them in 2000, it sounds like stewardship was the most important to you as well. Could you talk on that? Like why stewardship was such a big piece to you?
It was because I think this is not different than in most businesses that I interface with, is that, well, let me speak more specifically about our space. Within our space of being in the food business, I don't know, you lived in upstate New York for a pretty long time, like 20 some years, right?
16, yeah, Albany area.
Yeah, so that's a long time, but see, you may or may not remember or even know that in this local community that we're in right now, it was a food business community. I mean, one of the largest beef packers is still there. It was owned by the Moyer family. Did you know that?
No.
So it was called Moyer family owned one of the largest beef packing companies right up the road from us on Allentown Road. Well, they sold. The company is now owned by people in Brazil. Right up from that was a large poultry company. That was Long Acres Poultry.
Yeah.
That was then sold a couple of times, but ultimately to a company called Pilgrim's Pride. And then there were several other companies locally that either spun off to larger companies or closed doors. And, it's pretty much us and March O'Veal left on right off of Allentown Road in the food business. But it was a very, very food related kind of community that we live in. But point being is that we needed to grow in order to compete. I mean, it was just that simple. Because we were up against, these multinational companies and we had to grow, but we still wanted to be large enough to matter, but small enough to care. Ooh. So when you talk about this space kind of like in the middle, you've often heard people say, well, being in the middle, that's not really you want to be. You either want to be a small niche player that you can be special and charge more, or you need to be a large volume commodity player. We kind of chose the space right in the middle that we could be large enough to matter, but small enough to care. So that's the space that we kind of created for ourselves. And that has proved to be a pretty good strategy, not only over the last 20 some years, but I think for the next probably 50 years moving forward. So that's one thing that I really didn't preach, but tried to share and teach during my career was that simple.
How did stewardship play into that?
So stewardship played into that is that, a lot of people are really comfortable doing what they know. So what we knew was the food space. We knew it. And, I got into a lot of discussions. Well, we can't get outside of that box because, we're going to get lost if we get out of our lane. So then we started having conversations. Well, we know something about real estate, don't we? Because we had purchased land to build hog farms. We had purchased land to do building projects. So we knew a little bit about land development. So in the mid 2000s, we ended up forming another entity called Clemens Real Estate. So that land around the plant formerly known as Hatfield Quality Meats, now known as Clemens Food Group. It was all open farmland. And I remember my grandfather and his brothers had purchased that land for one reason and one reason only, was to protect the meat packing plant.
Mm.
So that's what I grew up hearing. Well, we need to buy this land to protect,
Mm.
which was really, really a great idea. And then I started thinking about what exactly we're protecting. We're protecting, do we want to be invisible? Do we not want people to hear noise? What exactly are we protecting? So the more those questions, the more that question got raised, more and more the question became, are we being true stewards of the asset that was entrusted into our care by having this open real estate just sitting there doing nothing? It was not doing nothing. It was being rented to he was my brother-in-law then. My brother-in-law was a local farmer, is still a local farmer. And I think we were renting it to him for like $25 an acre. So I had another conflict going on here, because if we ended up developing this land, then my brother-in-law was going to be losing farmland.
Mm-hmm.
Land is a precious commodity in this region, but there's just simply farming in this area just wasn't going to be sustainable for the future. So that's what it came back to, this principle of stewardship, asking the question of, are we being good stewards of this asset, meaning that land? So it took us out of our lane of something we knew something about, but we weren't experts in it. And now we've got real estate. We've got lots of real estate right now, mostly commercial estate. We've got apartment buildings. We've got a Verizon store down in King of Prussia, and the list kind of goes on. So we diversified into space.
I really like how you broadened maybe what people would think the word stewardship means. Sounds like your grandfather and his brother, they defined it as, we're going to protect it. Here's this thing that we own. We're going to protect it. And certainly that's a factor that we're not going to say that's not. We're going to, just like as men, we're called to protect our families, But the part that I see different with you is you have a growth mindset, and you saw the two stewards, how they invested what they had, they doubled it, and they were good and faithful, while the one that buried it in the ground, I mean, not to say that farming is burying something in the ground, but,
right.
but just the fact that you've added this other dimension, which is clearly written in Matthew. So it's the protection piece, the growth piece. And is there another part to stewardship besides those two?
No, those are the two fundamental basics, but just to add to that, and this is not biblical, but I can tell you I heard it over and over again growing up, is the simple statement of, when you're green, you grow, when you're ripe, you rot. So this whole notion of growing, that it was something that I really believed in, that growing, because and this is probably a stewardship principle. I mean, I feel very strongly about giving back to the community. Well, if you're staying very tiny and small, well, you've got limitations about how much you can give back to the community. I believe strongly in providing jobs, and certainly I witnessed during my lifetime the 100% of the team member makeup that worked at Hatfield when I was a kid, and even into my teen years. There was one employee that drove from Quakertown to come to work, and people couldn't believe that somebody would drive that far to come to work from Quakertown.
Yeah, well, they had a horse and buggy, so of course.
So it was Hatfield, Mainland, Souderton, Franconia, Telford. That's where 99% of the employees came from. Well, now they're coming from North Philadelphia, Reading and west of Reading, from Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton, and more than half of them are not white Mennonite farm boys and girls, that are coming to work in a meatpacking company today. So we really had to kind of open up and come to an understanding about, if we're going to grow, the literal face of this business is going to change.
Just digging into what you're saying, and you said protection and growing, and the first piece of growth you mentioned was the asset of the land itself. And the second piece you talked about was the asset of the people, like the people asset, and what you're giving back to the community. So am I right in saying that you felt it was your responsibility as a leader to continue growing the company so that you could provide more and better jobs and a better quality of life for the people in the community. Is that a safe?
100%. Yes.
Because that's what I heard. And that's another component of stewardship. There's a lot of companies that say, well, I just like to stay small. I did this, Doug, for the first 16, 17 years of running a cleaning company, mostly in upstate New York. I was just doing the work by myself, and I carved out a nice full-time income a couple days a week, but I had no employees. And certainly it was stewarding what I've been given for my family, but I wasn't providing anything back for the community. And now I'm on the other end, and we're climbing up to our first batch of 10 employees pretty soon. And I can start to see what that is doing at a small scale. I can only imagine what that's like with, multiply that by 1,000. So
Yeah.
talk on that.
And well, for just to back up for 1 second, for sure, I am not suggesting that you need to get bigger. I just know that in our food production space, we didn't have any choice. I mean, many other businesses can stay small, can still be relevant, can still provide, help back the community and hire people and those kind of things. But what I was seeing within the agricultural space, that we just didn't have much of a choice, because we were not a niche high price company. It was too late for that because the brand was already established, and it was a high quality brand for a reasonable price. So for us to stay true to that, we didn't have any option but to grow. So I'm not suggesting that everybody needs to do that. I'm just suggesting that for us,
yes,
from my viewpoint, we didn't have any choice but to grow.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to doing this conversation with you for quite a while. I'm so glad this worked out. Thank you so much for giving of your time so generously. And I know that this interview, however we edited it out, we'll have to cut some pieces here, maybe make a shorter version for those that have short commutes and a longer version for those that really want to dig into your full story. However it is, it's going to be a seed, and it's going to be water. It's going to help a lot of people. Thank you.
Well, I hope you found it worth your time, and I hope that this is a major contributing thing to your lead project that gets you either a passing grade or a good grade or something, another award like that or something. So I just hope that you found it interesting and worth your time.
I loved it. Thank you so much, Doug.
You're welcome.
Keep listening and may curiosity guide you.